Okay, so we are back.
We had a pee break.
Oh, is that right? I hope it felt good.
Wonderful. Where are the women at?
Well, there's one sitting here.
True.
You better be careful what you say. You know, it could backfire on you. So we just heard Fire Ant Noodle from The Garden, and one of several Noodle tracks, which you should explain to everyone. And I'll just also say that we heard Misty Mountain from the remixes of Beacon, done by Alpha Stone or Pete Bassman. And yeah, what about this Noodle business? How did that come about, and why are they sort of a series of noodles here?
When the Wire magazine reviewed Decatur, they said that what I was doing was basically just so much noodling around. It was not a great review. And so I said, well, I like that word, noodle. Yeah, I was noodling around. I liked that. That's what I was doing. And so when we discovered in Danny's attic this whole box full of old tapes, one of the things we pulled out was about an hour and a half of him practicing his drums in the studio while the tape was running. And so there was nothing on there but him. And so I took segments of it, in some places where it made sense, and some places where it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I just tried to play oscillators and stuff along with it. And basically came up with about 7 cuts that I felt had some continuity to them, and that sort of expressed things that Danny was trying to do at the time and stuff. Basically, it's a showcase for Danny. That I just kind of like sit in the background and, as the Wire magazine said, noodle along. I've always tried to take negatives and turn them into positives. And there was a guy giving me a bad review, calling me a noodler. Okay, I'll noodle. I'll make it my thing. And so I called them all noodles. And just sort of based on the flavor of them, I chose different names for them. You know, call them Anasazi noodle,
right.
this or that noodle, cockroach noodle.
Right, and we heard the Fire Ant Noodle.
Fire Ant Noodle, yeah.
I enjoy them because I've always played against Simeon the instrument, which would always change. I mean, a cloud went overhead and the plug would fall out, you know. We lose a bass line, we lose this, and I always had to get in there and keep it all going.
So it kept you on your toes.
So, yeah, it always kept me on my toes. And here was one time I didn't have to worry about it. It was already done.
It was done. He had to be on his toes.
He had to be on his toes to figure out what I'm going to do next.
I saved your butt a couple of times. I heard some stick clicks and some drop beats in there, and I didn't
No, the stick clicks,
present them
they're
to the
there
world.
For a purpose.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, see, today, you know, you can go into the studio, and unlike back in the 60s, you don't have to pull out the razor blade and, you know, cut things out anymore.
Yeah.
You go in with, like, there's all this computers and all this stuff, and it's all, like, really mysterious, you know.
We always found that it was the just to do it live. Whatever we put down, that was it. Then we had to figure out how we did it.
Which brings me to this whole issue of, like, how you recorded your first album, because the story goes that you went into, you know, Cap hired you to do this first album, and they had assigned a producer to you, and then the producer just didn't show up.
Yeah,
He was terrified that his association with us would be the end of his career.
Yeah, and like Roger Williams is like putting him on the map, right?
Right.
I mean, Roger Williams was like the one guy that Cap apparently made all their money from, but I mean, you know, what is that? You know, I mean, I don't understand.
The engineers at Cap were great. They always they did symphony orchestras on mono, and they got a stereo machine. And I think it was like 6 months before we showed up, they got their 4-track machine. They never had a 4-track machine.
Right.
And the engineers were flabbergasted that, 4 tracks. And
to them, it was huge heaven, you know.
Yeah, it was absolutely unbelievable for them. And we found that recording, because we ended up doing a lot of our own engineering and producing at that point.
Right,
And
which you were not really.
No, because our producer had hidden away in a hospital room someplace claiming he had mononucleosis so that he
and
wouldn't have to
he
come out.
couldn't have handled it anyway. There
I
were
know.
certain notes, you'd hit a certain note that you couldn't hear, and yet the meters would pin. And other notes, the meters would just lay there like nothing was happening. You had to pull your headsets off because it was so loud. So you had to learn how to
You had to learn
You know,
how to actually
how to
engineer
record-
the
how to
album.
engineer it because no one ever did it before.
But so
And,
they weren't really very helpful towards
Well,
you at all.
we'd do a take and then look at the engineer and say, was that all right? And he'd say,
I don't know.
Oh, man.
Meters would be jumping all around. Go, quiet. No, it didn't sound like that in the studio. You
But
know?
I mean, you would think that they had a vested interest at that point. You'd think that they would try to like move it along.
Oh, they did. They worked along with us. The engineers at CAP were very nice.
Don was his name,
Don,
the main
it
one.
was great.
But the thing is, they wasted a lot of your time and a lot of their own time.
well,
We had nothing but time.
at that point, it didn't really make a difference.
We were under
he
some...
enjoyed. If you can sit down and record a symphony orchestra on a mono machine, or a stereo, and have the total separation. At that time, you were a fantastic engineer, and that's what Don was. He got the 4-track machine, and it was like, oh, I got 2 extra tracks. I can do anything with this. And then he made us.
Were you guys listening to any, particular bands at that time that you could say were influential towards you?
No.
I don't think so, no.
Really?
Like I said, we were pretty much ensconced in Barry Bryant's studio just trying to figure out how to make music with what we had. And so we didn't... we were aware. It's not like we were totally in a cave or something.
Right.
We were aware of other bands and what they were doing, but we were not like saying, well, let's try this or let's try that sound based on what we were hearing from other bands. It was like totally trying to invent something from scratch, practically, from what we had.
At the time, I was a Beatles fan. I loved the Beatles. I love what George Martin could do
Oh, yeah.
in the studio,
Yeah.
And when the regular group was together with regular instruments, it was very important to me. Once Simon and I got together, that was it. That went out the window.
Right. So you were on your own at that
Totally
point.
on our own.
Yeah,
you know?
it was like just new territory. Everything we did was like, well, who's going to buy this,
We did one of the cuts we did at Apostolic Studios. We had an Apostolic. The Mothers of Invention had just left the studio in total chaos, but there was an oscilloscope, and one of the songs that we did on an oscilloscope gave a pattern, the visual pattern of a beating heart, and we mixed that to keep that physical, the sight of the beating heart intact. I forgot which song it was, but one of them.
So you used it
play
on the
through-
track.
Yeah, no, it was the entire song. If you look on an oscilloscope, was a beating heart. So as we mixed it and we tried to keep that visual image.
So how did it evolve onto the next album? That you got to record. It seems like a more produced record.
Yeah, well, we had 12 tracks by that point because we were in California. And Cap Records was associated with Universal City. We, because of that association, had access to the Universal City Studios. And so we were able to go out there, and on this tour, we took like 5 or 6 days off and went in there and laid down the basic tracks for Contact. We then took the 12-track tapes back to New York to Apostolic Studios, as Danny said, and did the final thing. By this time, Cap Records was just about belly up. They were not wanting to put anything more into it than they already had. And so we ended up having to really rush the project. And some of the vocals and some of the other parts of it were left just with the
basic.
The in-studio
Scratch track or something?
Yeah, just like
Really?
the things where Danny and I were just talking to each other, talking our way through the song, that kind of thing, building these tracks. We ended up having to use those as the final vocal. And so some of those I've always felt I would like to redo, but they're sort of like gaining a sort of a character of their own just because of that total panicness of them.
Right.
So I don't know. We just let it lay.
One thing that I was curious about, you did a soundtrack for a Rudy Burkhart film.
Yeah.
Is that available at all, or is it going to be?
It's not a bad.
No, I'm
film.
talking
I mean,
about the soundtrack.
Oh, well, it's on. I don't know if it's ever been released as a soundtrack, but it's certainly on the movie.
Right.
The movie's shown at the Museum of Modern Art and all this stuff.
Right. But I mean, as just the music, any idea that
it wasn't
to try
music.
to release it?
It was sound effects.
Oh, I see.
I had a little tape recorder and a microphone, and Red Grooms did the sets and things for it, and it was a movie called Shoot the Moon, and I did the sound effects of the rocket taking off and landing on the moon, footsteps, this kind of thing, mostly just with a little mono tape recorder that I walked around in Rudy's studio and just for the takeoff of the rocket, I stuck the tape recorder inside his locker. He had a metal locker that he kept some wires and stuff in. And when he said, "Okay, ready, go," I just beat the crap out of that locker. And what happened on the tape is this sort of like, you can hear it when the rocket takes off. It goes. It's not. It sounds like the engine's sputtering and stuff, but it's just me banging on a locker.
Wow.
It was very crude.
Wow.
But it worked with the film because everything is set. Red Room sets were like very primitive. And the whole concept of the movie was that this was like a spoof on the Jules Verne thing. So it was a fun project.
So, going back to this, the remix record, we didn't really talk extensively about this at all. One thing I'm curious about is how you feel about the current trend, and I mean I assume that you've heard some of the new electronic music that's happening out there, and a lot of it seems to be I don't know how to put this. There's a lot of this remix stuff.
Say what's on your mind, Fabio.
There's a lot of this remixing going on by various art musicians, right? And it seems to be taking on like a kind of a life of its own, like a style, if you want to call it that, of its own. And what do you think about like this kind of music, like drum and bass, electronica, techno, all this stuff that's really sort of like gurgling, and coming to the forefront right now as a very popular form?
I love it.
Really?
Absolutely love it, and I'm honored that these guys would come in and want to remix our stuff. As a matter of fact, one of them, Salaryman, has contacted me and asked me to remix their next thing.
Really?
So, there's nothing better than artists, whether they're musicians or architects or poets or whatever, communicating with each other through their art. There's nothing more inspiring, nothing more meaningful to an artist than to have that kind of interaction. And I'm absolutely bowled over that anybody would take the interest in my music, or our music, Danny's. And now that I'm so used to doing these interviews without Danny, I'm seeing my music. I welcome it all. I would love to do other people, and I've already recorded 2 records with other people. Sonic Boom and I did a project together, and there's a band in Somerset, England called The Alchemists, and we've recorded a joint Silver Apples Alchemist CD that's being sent right now as we speak by Dad to me for like.
So you did a whole album with Sonic Boom?
It's an EP. And 5 songs. He wrote 3 and I wrote 2. I sang on his songs and he sang on mine, and then we sang on each other's. We did backup harmonies and stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's in between. It's sort of like instrumental.
But you played together?
Yeah, in the studio in Coventry, England.
Wow. And when is that due out?
It should be this fall. This happened in June when I went over to do the Meltdown Festival. Hooked up with him. We had been talking about it. And Peg and Steve, his record label guy, got together and worked out the details. And so when I had time off from the tour in England, I sat down with Sonic for 2 days, and he brought in some of the members of Spacemen 3 and Spectrum to fill in like rhythms and other things. Seems to me there was a bass line that was done by one of the Spectrum guys, but there was a bevy of musicians in there. And we basically, we wrote the lyrics and composed the songs on the spot, rehearsed them enough to get them going, and then recorded them. He's an incredible musician. It's amazing how fast he is. He's very attention to detail and all that stuff, but he does rock and roll when he gets into a studio. He makes it happen. And he's the boss. He's the guy who just like says, you do this, you do that, tells the engineer what to do. In fact, he jumps up and shows the engineer how to plug stuff in and stuff. It's like he almost knows more about it than they do.
Well, they've been, I guess, doing that for the last 15 years or so. So they really feel comfortable, I guess, in the studio. So, and you, Danny, how do you feel about this whole new trend?
I enjoy it, but there's certain points, just from a drummer's aspect, I've listened to things that, what a great beat, and half hour later they're going,
but you do that.
Yeah, he's a live drummer. It's a different thing.
Yeah,
it's like little accents
there's
and
a physical thing that you can't do that long, that fast, and that just, it gets me a little irk, It's I don't mind the sampling. I don't mind the loop tracks or anything, because it is part, of music today.
Well, you guys even did that then. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no loops. We had no loops.
No, not loops, but this sort of collage effect, like on the song Program. You had a short wave or something.
I mean, just regular radio.
Right, but I mean the effect is like the sort of collaging kind of thing, which today is like very common, very prominent, although it's done much more
sophisticated.
Well,
say it.
Not really. Well, not necessarily,
but a bit of radio.
Very determined, very carefully layered or whatever.
Well, there's a 32 beat thing that goes on, and it's a predictable change. I kind of like to stretch it out of that some, and I think that we weren't locked into the dance thing of the 32
no,
beats,
of course
so
not.
we were not influenced by that.
Well, we went
thing,
through
but
so many changes with programs, the different things. At one point they said hawk it, all right, and that's what they said, hawk it, and we heard it,
Hawk it?
Hawk it.
on the record,
On the record, and that's what they
sounds
said,
like the
but-
F word.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right? I see.
Cap
And we went
went
through the roof.
conniptions over that. Here we had sampled probably 30 or 40 things off the radio and compiled them. And they were concerned that they were going to have to pay licensing and royalties and everything to every one of these people that we had sampled off the radio. They were going to have to go by and reconstruct everything that we had done, sort of like at random,
Go figure, take
off
years.
the radio, and their lawyers just went through conniptions over this for a while. We finally were able to convince them that if you just take a short sampling of somebody, you aren't compromising yourself legally.
Yeah, I mean...
And so we just kept the radio moving. And that has kind of become the basis for how to sample people without paying for it today.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain cutoff where you can sample for a certain length of time, but I don't know exactly what it is, 1 second or whatever. But if you go beyond that, then you're in trouble, and you have to get permission.
When we did
and all
it,
that.
it wasn't sampling. It was turning the dial and picking up this
But
station
that's the
and
same
that
thing.
station and this station. There was no set order or anything.
Right.
We just picked up that was
But
there.
you took something that was out there, already existed.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
so in that respect, it was sampling.
Right.
We did sample off of the radio,
Right.
onto the tape deck, and then use it and released it, and that was not done before.
But just not to harp on this, but because I'm really interested in the development of this kind of music, and to my ears, a lot of it is not well defined enough, or not to put it down or anything. But there's so much of it coming out right now, partially due to the availability of technology and a lot of other things. Recording equipment is very cheap now. compared to the way it was in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you don't have to lug, a big, 4-track or 8-track and all this other equipment, right? You can basically do everything on a kitchen table.
Yeah.
I've been amazed going into Simeon's studio and seeing the same capabilities that we had 30 years ago in a 2x4 square foot
Right.
space, where before it was just.
It would be a whole room.
This whole studio would be filled with,
Right. So, but my take on that is that necessarily a good thing? Because so many people who are not necessarily, how should I put this? Really, really passionate about what they're doing. They're just like, okay, well, this is something I can do, and like I'm going to try it, right?
Well, there's always going to be that,
but there's a lot of it.
What this does is give you freedom. For those of you who are passionate, it gives you the freedom of doing it in your kitchen, as opposed to have to paying, enormous dollars to go into a studio and do it. And I'm thinking that recording studios, as they are now, are possibly in a phasing out period. That sure, analog sounds wonderful. There's nothing to compare to the wonderful, rich sound of tape. It does sound beautiful, but little by little, the engineers at various of these manufacturers who produce the digital stuff are getting that together. And I think that one of these days it's going to be almost impossible to tell the difference. Only a very strictly trained recording engineer could tell. And you're not recording for them. You're recording for an audience that's not that sophisticated, people who are listening to it in their cars.
Well, again, I have to say that a lot of the stuff that's out there, like, for example, they've been trying to, like the major corporations have been pushing, for example, the mini disc as a, listening format. And if you really listen to a mini disc, it sounds horrible. I mean, for music, it's good for like, recording notations or whatever, but we use them here as carts now. But to listen to music on them, excuse me, it's really harsh. I mean, it's like somebody's sticking an ice pick in your ears, and to me, it's like they're trying to force this stuff on the public so that they can just sell more product, basically.
Oh.
But the quality of the what they're getting is being slowly degraded as they go along. And this is where I have like a kind of a
well, the industry has to develop as far as that goes. I mean, when the CDs first came out, and vinyls, when we went from the 45s to the LPs, and the LPs went from the 78 to the 33 and a third. It's all an involvement. The involvement of these mini CDs is the same thing. I mean, it'll come around. But they'll build the technology to back it up. Well, you have the technology. They could do it now, but you don't want to spend, $50 for a CD, or $50,000 for a recorder to
Yeah, but my point is that okay, they have these mini discs, for example, and they just they sell them outright. They're selling them now, and they're trying to really. They've been trying for the last 5-6 years to get them really rolling. And
but they're designed to for your answer machine and for a little notepad.
Well, mini discs, they have
so
pre-recorded music on them, and fortunately to me, they haven't been really popular as yet. Become that popular anyway.
Again, they're bucking against the other industry of the regular size CD.
Yeah, but it's the same people. I mean, Sony, Maxell, whatever.
I'm going to go have a beer.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll play some music. We'll get off this.
There's some plan there somewhere.
Okay, let's hear a little more from. Actually, Decatur is in the background again, but
Play I'm walking.
Play what?
Play I'm walking.
I'm walking.
Walking. It's the
Walking.
third cut.
Yes. Okay. We'll do. Walking. This is from The Garden. This is a track called Walking. Well, we're coming down to the final stretch here, last 10 minutes of the show.
revolution.
That's, as I was saying earlier, just a few seconds ago, to Simeon, it's kind of, that particular track sticks out amongst the rest of the material for whatever reason. It's sort of an oddity.
My banjo playing was pretty much learned from a bluegrass standpoint, and this was, I was taking the banjo, trying to do something different, and I don't know if I achieved anything, but...
Back then we did Jesse James. I thought
Well,
that
yeah.
was very
Jesse
nice.
James?
Oh, yeah.
And the Ballad of John Hardy is on was on the Garden.
Yes.
That's sort of like legit banjo playing. This Confusion was my feeble attempt to try and take the banjo to another level so that it would...
Level of the synthesizer.
Yeah, kind of, because as you know that... As you noticed, that there is no, quote, simian instrument
Right,
in there.
right.
It's basically the banjo and the drums together. And the song is about chaos. And we just kind of tried to take it somewhere. And I don't know that we achieved anything, but it's there.
We had a good time.
Yeah.
We had a good
Right.
time. That's the main thing, you know.
So now you're going on tour, and you're going to be recording a new record.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? I mean, what do you think is going to happen with this new record? I mean, what you know? That's kind of a vague question. What direction do you want to take it in? What do you see doing together now for the next whatever years? Or
We're going to pretty much, I think, and Danny, holler at me if I'm saying something wrong, but I think we're going to pretty much go back to our original composition format where we worked out stuff through jamming together over long periods of time and pulled out of those jams ideas for songs. And so there's no way to tell what's going to happen. I mean, whatever happens, happens.
Something like out of 2010, this is a new experience.
There's certainly not going to be...
Hopefully, by 2010, they'll buy the album.
Probably not.
30 years to figure this one out.
well, I think you have
But
a
I-
lot more
I
fans
enjoy
now than you had, back then. I'm sure. I mean, there's so many more people who have heard your music in the last 30 years now. It's incredible.
Well, there's more people admitting it,
I mean, no, it's really, it's just, there's quite a lot of people.
Come out of the closet for silver apples.
But I mean, worldwide now you have. I mean, I remember being in Germany and seeing a German pressing. I think it was German of the first album at a record fair.
I was amazed to find out about this. Again, I've been listening for Silver Apples, never expecting to hear it, and I've called different radio stations. I haven't actually called FMU, but there's a station out of Poughkeepsie. I can't think of the name of it right now, but disc jockey, the Juicer.
Juicer?
Jukester. Jukester. And she played a lot of electronic. And I asked her, I called her up a couple of times. I said, why don't you play Silver Apples? And she said, oh, I don't have the album. You can get me the album. Yeah. You're the DJ. You can get an album from any place, And, so I asked, around a little bit. This is only in the past year or so. And it was just amazing that when I caught up with Simeon again, he told me and showed me press clippings and what of all these groups that were sampling our music and doing the same songs and doing them well. And the drummers were playing what I could play, It was absolutely amazing.
Well, I know for a fact that there's quite a few drummers who are very influenced by your work. They've said to me, this guy really affected the way I play.
Yeah, well, but I used to play, I used to pick a rhythm and work it until I could carry on a conversation. And then I'd drop a beat here or add a beat there. And most of it was probably by mistake. But I learned it. I learned all my mistakes. I figure if I learn all my mistakes, then I can't make any mistakes. And especially playing against Simeon, the Simeon, not Simeon the person, but Simeon the instrument, that always screwed up and still does.
I think it was Thomas Edison said that he said, I haven't made 10,000 mistakes. I've learned 10,000 ways not to make mistakes.
He probably could have been a good drummer.
Yeah.
Well, we have to wind down the programming here.
No, we're going to wind it up for the end, not wind it down for the end. So think positive.
Well, we're yes. Well, it is, because we're going to play one last track from the Garden, as requested by you.
Two of them. You got to play that one, and you got to.
Well, I don't know that we can squeeze two in now.
You can squeeze it. Come on.
We have to make room for the hour of slack at 11.
The hour of the slack. The hour of slack.
Dan, if you keep talking, he ain't gonna play nothing.
See, every now and then that southern twang comes out of you. It's really funny. You know, you can tell.
No,
you know, he's like a southern boy.
He calls his mom, and like 2 minutes into the conversation, I can't understand a thing he's saying.
It's that New Orleans. Did any of that like southern, like, you know, Cajun stuff ever influence you? I mean,
Fats Domino, huge.
Dr. John?
Dr. John, but not. Dr. John came after me, but the early New Orleans guys, Big Joe Turner, Big Mama Thornton, who wrote
Professor Longhair?
No,
No?
but Fats Domino definitely. I was hugely influenced by him.
And Simeon's cooking is fantastic.
Is it?
Cook. Oh. Really, absolutely.
Right. Well, I want to thank you all of you, for coming down to the studios and, you know, telling us this great story. And I wish you a lot of luck with your new record.
Thanks.
Your
Thank
new old
you.
record and records to be. I'm sure they're going to be a lot of fun.
It's
and
been great.
Whirlybird Records.
Whirlybirds.
good luck with the Garden. It's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the vinyl pressing.
We had the Garden all documented 30 years ago. So the past recent Woodstock thing called the Garden.
You know, we should mention also the
March.
cover art is really beautiful. What is the woman's name again?
Eileen
Eileen,
Llewellyn.
yes.
She's the one who wrote Misty Mountain and
Right.
I've Known Love.
Right.
She did the cover art for the original Garden back in '69,
Right.
and when it pooped out, didn't happen, she just, I guess, stuck it in a box, and we found it in a basement in Virginia.
Really?
Yeah.
The original art.
The original
Yeah,
art.
I loved it.
tapestry.
I said this is the cover of the third album, and
That's great.
took
That's
30
really
years
great.
to get it printed, but
Wow.
it was perfect. It was just exactly what we wanted.
That's excellent. So it's out in the stores tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, people can run out and get it.
Hopefully.
And,
if the distributors are on their toes and shit.
Yeah.
They should be. Actually, I think that you have a distributor out in California that I saw it being distributed already.
Good.
If I'm not mistaken. But, all right. Well, good luck with all your work. Godspeed.
Fabio, God
Forge
bless
ahead.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. It's
And
been great.
we'll be talking at you and with you again.
All right.
All right. We're going to hear Mustang Sally from the Garden right now. And
then maybe Madman Blues.
I don't know.
Maybe,
WFMU East Orange, WXHD Mount Hope. I'm Fabio. I'll be back next week. And thanks once again to my guests, the Silver Apples. And Peg Udo.
Whirlybird
All right.
Records.
Oh, we got
And
it.
Whirlybird Records.
We
yes.
got her.
And
We got her.
And here is Mustang Sally.
Woo!